There was a 228 peace movement that asked the government to go back and start to remember this incident, the memory of which has been suppressed for decades.
Transitional justice encompasses a set of policy measures which are devised to deal with the past. Authoritarian regimes, civil wars, genocide, colonization, slavery, and all sorts of historical injustices.
I'm saddened that some of these things are kind of winding down and distributed amongst the various ministries. I don't think that's the correct approach.
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Tomasz Koper, sitting in for Divya Gopalan. February 28th is Peace Memorial Day in Taiwan. It was first established in 1995 and made into a public holiday 2 years later. The day commemorates the victims of the February 28 incident of 1947 and, more broadly, of Taiwan's authoritarian past. TaiwanPlus reporter Eric Gao gives us a brief summary of those events.
On February 27, 1947, less than 2 years after Taiwan was handed over to the Republic of China by Japan, agents of the government's Tobacco Monopoly Bureau beat a widow selling contraband cigarettes. A crowd quickly gathered around them, and in the ensuing scuffle, they shot and killed a bystander. The following day, there was a demonstration to demand justice. Soldiers opened fire on them, killing 3 people. More massacres followed as Taiwan rose in rebellion, with civilians taking control of large parts of the island within a few days. The uprising was brutally quashed by then-President Chiang Kai-shek's forces within weeks. It's impossible to know how many people lost their lives during that time, but most estimates range in the tens of thousands. 2 years later, after having lost the civil war against the communists in China, Chiang fled to Taiwan with the remnants of his army and swiftly enacted martial law. It lasted for nearly 40 years. This period, characterized by extrajudicial killings, arbitrary imprisonment, torture, suppression of free speech, and one-party rule by the Kuomintang, is known as the White Terror.
To learn more about how Taiwan is dealing with its troubled past and its efforts to move forward, we welcome Professor Chia-Shin Hsu from Academia Sinica's Institute of Law. And from Hong Kong, we are joined by Roman David from Lingnan University. Chia-Shin, I want to start with you here. Why does Taiwan remember the 228 or February 28 incident and the White Terror period together on one day?
I think in modern Taiwanese historical memory, 228 incident can be properly considered as the founding event or founding incident of the imaginary of Taiwan's self-consciousness. And in the early years of Taiwan's democratization, it was the 228 incident that was first being raised by the opposition elites as an issue that they requested the KMT government to deal with, an issue of remembrance. So there was a 228 peace movement that asked the government to go back and start to remember that this incident, the memory of which has been suppressed for decades.
And Roman, you are a researcher focusing on transitional justice, and since we're going to be hearing that term a lot in today's show, could you briefly tell us what sets transitional justice from other kinds of justice that our viewers might be more familiar with?
So transitional justice encompasses a set of policy measures which are devised to deal with the past. By the past, we usually mean authoritarian regimes, civil wars, genocide, colonization, slavery, and all sorts of historical injustices. And so this is a way of dealing with issues which are much more structural, much deeper than individual level justice. So transitional justice has this a huge constitutive role to play in every society. And to a question which was previously raised to Chia-Shin, I would add to it that memory is part of identity. Person's identity of who I am, where I come from, it derives from that individual memory. But memory is also very important for collectives. And so it is shared memory, and it is a memory which is collective, which gives meaning to certain collective identity. And transitional justice as a process of dealing with this type of measures of structural injustices is essentially forging that identity.
Well, before we move on, let's listen to a quick overview of Taiwan's experience with transitional justice. For that, we reached out to Thomas J. Shattuck, a senior program manager at Perry Worldhouse at the University of Pennsylvania. Take a look.
Since Taiwan democratized, there had been pressure to address the White Terror and the atrocities committed under the authoritarian period. But because the Kuomintang controlled the presidency and the legislative yuan, there wasn't much progress. When Chen Shui-bian was elected president over 8 years, under his leadership, there was a little bit of progress here and there with some recognition of the atrocities. And then even President Ma Ying-jeou, he would go to the 228 Memorial Park, things like that. But there really was never major bureaucratic efforts until Tsai Ing-wen was campaigning in 2016. Since she took office over the last 8 years, though the commissions haven't been around for the entire 8 years, they had a lot of work to do. They had decades of things to go through and only about 4 or 6 years to really do it. So considering the very short period of time, I would say it was a success. I'm saddened that some of these things are kind of winding down and distributed amongst the various ministries. I don't think that's the correct approach because we have essentially 40 years of things to go through, whether it's the period of the White Terror, but there's also the disappearances and murders later on during the authoritarian period, even into the 80s. And 4 years is just frankly not enough time.
Well, Chia-Shin, we heard about the two commissions in that video just now. Taiwan's efforts towards transitional justice were centered around those two bodies, the Transitional Justice Commission and the Ill-Gotten Party Asset Settlement Committee. Can you briefly tell us what they were responsible for?
The Ill-Gotten Asset Committee is instituted to deal with the huge body of assets that was acquired after the war by the KMT as the party state, and as a party as a quasi-Leninist party state, the state and the party was very difficult really to distinguish, and so by conceiving, in those days. By conceiving the party and the state as so closely connected, the KMT was considered to have acquired a lot of assets by very shady or some explicitly illegal means. And the Ill-Gotten Assets Commission is instituted to deal with that. And the Transitional Justice Commission, in contrast, has a little bit broader commission. It is instituted to deal with the restoration of reputations of the past victims that were convicted during the authoritarian era, and also trying to deal with the so-called authoritarian symbols. And also a few other important, and also the collection of political archives, the continued collection of archives that has been, scattered around in various governmental bureaucracies, different units, different different departments, and also maybe in some private organizations.
And Roman, we've seen similar bodies form in other countries that are dealing with authoritarian past. And in some cases, it was more comprehensive, sort of centered in one body. In others, it was split between different commissions, like in Taiwan. Is one model inherently better than the other?
I would not say that there are models which are better or worse a priori, because every society is different, and we need to assess these measures of transitional justice to what extent they serve the needs of societies. And very often these are divided societies. So, for example, do they forge any kind of common sense of justice? Do they have ability to create shared narrative about the history, and in order to move towards a future which is more based on mutual respect and we could call it reconciliation. Some people don't necessarily like the term, but certain understanding is a precondition for democracy.
And Chia-Shin, the Transitional Justice Commission was dissolved in 2022, and its prerogatives have been distributed among various ministries. Do you think this will slow down the work that is still left undone for the commission?
The Transitional Justice Commission, from the very outset, was designed not to last just for good. They were commissioned to do a range of jobs. And then because of some political reasons, the Executive Yuan did not decide to prolong its terms. And they decided that by distributing its functions into the various ministries might be a better way to move forward. And is it going to affect those functions? I think a lot depends on the ruling administration. No matter whether those functions were to be continued to be concentrated in one commission, or being distributed as they are now among various bureaucracies. I think it depends on the Executive Yuan and the Premier.
Well, I want to switch gears a little bit here. Nan-jung was at the forefront of Taiwan's struggle for liberty and freedom of speech. He was charged with insurrection in 1989 after publishing his proposal for the Constitution of the Republic of Taiwan. At the time of his arrest, he set his office on fire and died in the blaze. Nan-jung's daughter was 9 years old when her father died. Today, she runs a foundation and a museum dedicated to his memory. She told us how it felt to get to know her dad through archival documents.
我们现在就在他以前上班的杂志社。刚刚也有看到焚烧的总编辑室。其实，在大学的时候，我是有一度，或者是我开始就业工作以后，20岁到30岁之间，我有的时候是不太爱来这里的，因为来会想到就是很伤心的事情。 以前我妈妈都告诉我说：“哦，爸爸是很爱我们的，他是因为很爱我们才做这件事情。”但我其实一直不是那么理解，甚至到我成年大学以后，也还是不那么理解。爸爸像太阳一样，如果太阳不见了，我会哭，我会笑，但还是照不回太阳。 大概是2015之后，我开始会想要更了解他的原因，是因为我其实我快要忘记他了。我其实除了我小时候几个画面，我可能不记得他的样子，所以我会很希望有人可以告诉我他做了什么事情，所以我开始去申请档案。
2019的时候，大概是出转会有一个当事人阅览计划，那我去主动申请了。我其实那时候申请，我没有意识到我会看到什么，我觉得我可能只是大概是拿到几页东西或判决书就没了。那没有想到我看到的是很多关于他的细节，就是我可能是我就是一直想要找的东西，就是他小学、中学、高中、大学的。成绩单，或是他里面写的话，甚至还有他当兵的自传或那个笔记，就我觉得我好像在那个档案里面看到我一个不认识的爸爸，那个感觉其实很痛苦也很奇妙，就是那一个时期一直都是可能会又哭又笑，或者我会觉得很讽刺，就是我必须是在国家监控档案里面去了解我的父亲。刚开始是悲伤，可是随着我去看政治监控档案，我看到的是那个政府它的全面的监控是如何渗透到人民的生活体制里面，那个的恐惧是很绵密的，所以我就无法想象我父亲那个时候的恐惧或是那样子的压力是多么的深，就是我们的父母辈或者是我们的祖父母辈都是这样子。如果10年、20年或未来20年后再来做这件事情，我们会更难去知道到底那个真实是什么。可是我还是鼓励大家去接近它的原因是，真实才能让自己真正的自由。
For the full version of our interview with Zheng Zhumei, visit our YouTube channel or the TaiwanPlus website. So, Chia-Shin, we've heard in the video that Ms. Zheng got to know her father through archival records, but some sections of those state security documents are still classified. Why is that, and will they ever see the light of day?
The collection of political archives during the authoritarian era is not all that easy. There's all sorts of difficulties, not only because that they are everywhere. They could be in a closet somewhere in a certain bureaucracy, and nobody knows where they are. But the difficulty is that there may be some deliberate efforts that are blocking those archives to be revealed. And so that's why the government has to entrust this function to a particular commission and give them authority, and as well as the coordinated function in order to find out all those archives. And Taiwan society still holds a certain level of caution about revelation of those archives, because there is still quite a level of tension between what do we do if those archives are made freely available. There's still high level of tension in Taiwan society, not fully ready to see what's in there.
And Roman, I see you wanted to jump in there.
Yes, I think this is again point which is being raised in all transitional societies which address authoritarian regimes or civil wars or you name it. Because there's always truth deficit. There's always something which is being hidden, something that people don't know, and in order to address that kind of truth deficit, various truth investigating bodies and commissions and opening archives have been instituted. And those institutions, they play quite a significant role from two aspects. On the one hand, from the kind of individual aspect, we have an individual person who is a daughter of somebody who tries to picture her father, tries to find out about what happened to him, what led him to the situation in which he was, and through this archives, she may find some answers to that question. So this is the individual dimension, but then there's this kind of a structural dimension in which We also see that many of those people actually they were involved in political projects. They were activists. They were members of various movements, and for them, the political was very much intertwined with their private lives. It was their mission, but the political aspect also awakens all other people around them, because they were trying to make society better. They believed in certain values and brought forward, for example, proposals, try to bring alternative solutions to problems. And for this reason, they have been appreciated and by the whole community. And opening of archives, in this sense, serves not only the family, but also serve the entire community, entire society to make justice.
One area of focus for transitional justice efforts in Taiwan is removing the symbols of authoritarianism and preserving the historical significance of places. TaiwanPlus reporter Tiffany Wong has this report on one of the most important government buildings in Taipei.
Ahead of the 77th anniversary of the 228 incident here in Taiwan, this office building of Taiwan's cabinet has been designated as a site of historical injustice. The building, which was the former site of the office of the Taiwan Provincial Administration, was one of many sites around Taiwan where military police fired on anti-government civilians in what became known as the 228 incident. It's one of dozens of recognized sites of historical injustice around the country, part of ongoing efforts to recognize atrocities committed not so long ago in Taiwan's past, and pay homage to the victims of government-sanctioned violence and oppression during the 228 incident and martial law period, which left thousands dead. Taiwan's premier said the new designation will serve as a reminder of Taiwan's struggles to achieve democracy.
虽然还有未尽之处，但是我们勇于直视历史的错误，并且将持续努力为台湾的民主打造更加和平、更加公义的乐土。让我们把行公义、好怜悯、长存谦卑的心放在我们的心上。
Today, descendants of victims of the 228 incident were also present at the dedication ceremony, placing white lilies to honor their memory. The cabinet has installed a new plaque and tools to help visitors learn more about the site and serve as a reminder that democracy requires reflection, even on the darkest parts of history. Andy Shi and Tiffany Wong in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Now, unfortunately, we're quickly running out of time, but I have one more question, Chia-Shin, for you. So one of the big prerogatives of the Transitional Justice Commission was removing those symbols of authoritarianism. But right in the middle of Taipei, there is the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall, which is pretty divisive, as is the figure of Chiang Kai-shek himself. Can you tell us what are some of the conversations surrounding that place, and how do you see its future?
The controversy around Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall stands at the center of contemporary Taiwan's conversation or controversy about historical memory. How exactly do we construct a memory that could be common to all? And so compared to political archives, if we can say that political archives are very important in the revelation of the small truth, one person, one case at a time. The controversy around Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall is about big truth, big narratives about the country's past. And these are stands at very different level. And the higher the level, the more controversy it provokes, because the historical memory that centers around Chiang Kai-shek as a central historical figure, no matter how you view him, there's all sorts of all the big historical events, big and small, bright or dark, are all centered around him, as any authoritarian leaders would. And if people today are still hesitant about its removal, the typical question would be that the way they would raise would be something like that. And how about Taiwan, which has progressed for so far into becoming, developing so fast, things like that. And of course, the dark side has been continuously brought up against Chiang Kai-shek. So I think the key to further progress of dealing with Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall is for people to continue this dialogue, whether there can be a common narrative or whether there can be some kind of a stance that can accommodate all these. It's very, very difficult, no doubt about that. But for such a complex, highly complex historical figure as Chiang Kai-shek, as well as his son, Jiang Jingguo, I think it stands in the middle of Taiwan's most controversial aspect of transitional justice.
Well, I'm glad we can have that dialogue openly in Taiwan right now, something that Zheng Nanrong, Nailan Zheng, and many other fighters for freedom of speech fought for. Thank you, both of you, for being on today's show. Chia-Shin Hsu, a research professor at Academia Sinica's Institute of Law, joining us from Taipei. And from Hong Kong, we had Roman David from Lingnan University. And to our audience at home, if you would like to join the conversation, head over to our social media channels and leave us a comment there. And if you're interested in learning more about transitional justice around the world, we will be discussing that in an upcoming episode. Thank you for being with us today, and remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected.